Try this out. Welcome everyone. It's been a while. We had a book talk last month, but I couldn't make it. So this is my first since the pandemic, pretty much. And I'm so glad to see everybody. So I'm Lillian Galloway, and I'm Assistant Director of Programming and Outreach Librarian. And we are going to try also recording the session. And so maybe put it on YouTube later if the audio is good enough. And what else do we have going on at the library? We have a concert next week, which is kind of a big deal. Friends of the library will be sponsoring a concert for us for the first time in a long time. And we're going to try out hosting this concert at the Silco. So it'll be Tuesday, May 10th at 4:30 p.m. at the Silco, thanks to the Friends. And so you're welcome to join us for that as well. Summer reading program is also upcoming. So we have adult summer reading as well as the children's activities. So we're excited to have people back in the building.
Do adults get prizes?
Adults get prizes. We have nice drawings for adults. Yes. So yeah.
Might you mention who's going to be performing at the Silco?
Folias Duo. It's a guitar and flute duo, husband-wife ensemble, and so they have their own original compositions, interesting take on classical music involving some jazz and world influences. So that should be very interesting. Good question. Okay. And I just want to remind you, with your library card, you can now get online services. In addition to ebooks, we now have Hoopla, which has movies and music and TV. And we have digital magazines with Flipster. We've got comics online and Rocket Languages and Ancestry.com. Databases are available here in the building. So those are all new things we're doing, and we're very excited. Thank you so much. And this is our speaker today, Marty Eberhardt. And she has been a director of botanical gardens in Tucson and San Diego, which has inspired this work. And is pleased to be here in Silver City now, using the other side of her brain for fiction. Thank you so much for being with us today.
I want to thank Lillian for asking me to do this, and also the Southwest Word Fiesta for co-sponsoring. And it's fun to see so many faces of people that I know and a few that I don't, and I hope that I will get to know you. So as Lillian said, here's the book, Death in a Desert Garden. It's set in a mythical botanical garden in Tucson. And when I thought about writing a mystery, and I thought about where it would be, it was pretty clear it was going to have to be in a botanical garden because I had spent so much of my life in botanical gardens. But more than that, I've spent a lot of my life in nonprofits, and I'm familiar with the board, the staff, the volunteers, the donors, the visitors, that whole web of people, and all of the motives for murder that exist in the nonprofit environment. I mean, if you've been deep in there, it's real. So I thought, okay, so the where of this book was clear. There are a couple of things that I wanted to communicate. One of them is I have a very deep and abiding love of the Sonoran Desert. And I wanted readers to smell and feel the desert and to sense its beauty and its power. And particularly at the time of year that this book takes place, which is at the end of June, which you in Silver City know what it's like at the end of June. It's very tense. It's like, is it gonna rain? Is it gonna rain? You ask everybody, you think it's gonna happen today, maybe it'll happen next week. Is that cloud, gonna multiply? Is it gonna happen? Everyone's tense, and the whole community is kind of on the same page until, it rains. And then it's this huge sense of community release. So I wanted to communicate that, but I also wanted the narrative of the book to follow that, so that, you know, when we finally figure out, we finally solve the mystery. Right. You know, so that was one thing I wanted to do. The other thing I wanted to do is I wanted my protagonist to be a single parent. I feel like single parents are very much underappreciated and underwritten, not underwritten like underwriting for KXCI or something, not written about enough. And I've thought about why. There are a couple of things. I think that, you know, if you're a single parent, you don't have time to write anything. And, you know, then by the time, you know, that phase of your life is over, maybe, you know, you have to wait, you have to be old like me, you know, to do it. And then the other thing is, in a mystery, you kind of don't want anything to get in the way of the action. And guess what? Kids get in the way, because you've got to, you know, make sure that they're appropriately fed. And if you have to go running and do something, not during work hours, someone has to take care of your children if you are a single parent. And from my point of view, rather than feeling like that gets in the way, I wanted to show that in the book, because that's life, and that's life for single parents. And so our protagonist, Bee Rivers, is a 38-year-old woman with 2 kids, 5 and 7 years old, a husband, ex-husband, who is not particularly helpful. She's just starting to date someone who we don't know if he's a very good risk or not, because he doesn't really seem to have it. He doesn't have a real job. So, you know, she's kind of out there. And so she's got a full-time job. She's got 2 kids. And then she's pulled into solving this mystery. Hi, Ted. And so why is she pulled in? Because her dear friend from school, Marcia Samuelson, turns out to be the police detective in Tucson assigned to the case. And Marcia trusts Bee. Bee has an alibi. He's on the inside at the gardens. And so Bee is pulled in for that reason. And the other reason she's pulled in is that a couple of people she cares about at the gardens actually look like they might get accused of murder. And she really doesn't want that to happen. So she feels impelled to, you know, do what she can to figure out who the real murderer is. So that's probably enough preface. I'm going to read you a few passages. I will say that it's hard to read passages from a murder mystery because you don't want to give away too much. But I'm going to do it, and we'll see if it sparks your interest. So the first passage I'm going to read about is right before the board staff retreat. It's very fraught. Board staff retreats can often be fraught, I must say. And so you should know that her 2 kids are Andy, who's 7, and Jesse, who's 5. And she's dropping them off at some friends because the board retreat is on a Sunday, because that was best for the board. And you should also know that Angus, who's mentioned here, is a horticulturist and someone she cares about at the garden. And Liz Shanley, the name of the gardens is Shanley Gardens. And Alan Shanley and Liz Shanley, it was their home. Alan is now dead, and Liz is the living founder, but she didn't really care that much about the gardens. So starting right in, I'm glad we're still friends with the Rices, Andy announced when he got up. Why wouldn't we be? Asked Bee. Oh, Mom, we're not still friends with some people we used to know, said Andy. He probably saw the guilt in her face before she forced a smile, because he continued, but we have some new ones, like Angus. The best she could manage was, you're right, Andy, things change. As she drove to Barb and John Rice's house, she thought about how couples always said they'd stay friends with both of you after you divorce. This was either naivete or a lie, depending on who said it. Bee's ex-husband had his own line of green cleaning products, and these days she never saw anybody they'd known from his work. On the other hand, she and Barb Rice had been friends since they'd both been to UC Santa Cruz, And Barb had been there for her solidly this whole last year of single parenthood. And the year before too, when Bee and Pat had been going to soccer practice and out to dinner and yes to bed together, even though Bee had the feeling the whole time that she was living in a movie set and Pat was going home somewhere after a few takes. She thought the disconnect was only in her mind, but Barb had forced her to ask herself if she was denying, not dreaming. That Sunday morning, as they sat at the table by the pool, Barb wouldn't even let her clear the table of blueberry muffin crumbs and brown omelet shards. While the kids jumped into the pool, Barb poured Bee another cup of tea and told her to sit and watch the saguaros fruit. The white crown of flowers on the giant cacti had turned to fruit since Bee had last been at the Rice's home. The juicy things would be ready for picking soon. She'd scheduled a class about gathering saguaro fruit. Thinking about work made her realize she'd better get going or she'd be late to the retreat. As Bee picked up her handbag and gulped her last bit of tea, Andy climbed out of the pool and said, "You work too much." Would it have felt better if he'd said it while looking her in the eye rather than mumbling it to the pool deck? Jessie was so busy jumping in and out of the pool that she barely acknowledged her mother's departure. Bee needed to carve out some time with Andy alone. She didn't want him to feel abandoned by both parents, and Pat's off again, on again attention to them had to have had an effect. She pulled the wet little boy to her for a hug. Then he did look up at her. "Have fun," she said. "I really have to go to this retreat. Wish I didn't." In the car, she shook off her worries about the kids and tried to think of a way to fix the garden's budget woes. Maybe there was something lurking in her subconscious. No, there wasn't. The gardens could hold the most popular classes more often, hold more events like Ethan's latest fundraising scheme, a tour of home patio gardens. But those things weren't going to generate a lot of money, kind of money needed to pay a staff member. She hoped the board members had some good ideas. When she pulled into the parking lot and rushed into the building, her skirt flared in a gust of hot wind. The wind was much worse than she'd realized in the shelter of the Rice's walled patio. She was dreading making an all too public late entrance, but when she opened the meeting room door, she was surprised to see there were only 2 people in the room. Angus was wearing his gardening clothes as usual, though he pulled out some very clean ones for the board retreat. He was talking with Alicia Vargas, the board president. Shanley's board of directors consisted of only 5 people. Alicia joined the board after the original 3. The mother and son pair, Liz and Myron Shanley, plus Liz's buddy Buffy, had decided they needed reinforcements. Setting policy and raising money for a, quote, top-notch garden, unquote, took a lot of work, unpaid work, as Liz was fond of noting, and Alicia was an efficient businesswoman. She dressed the part, too. Her black linen pants fit her trim figure perfectly. Her white linen shirt was not too wrinkly, and her Mexican Tasco jewelry shone with multicolored opals. "Bee, welcome," she said. "Guess I'm not too late. Where is everybody?" "They're making their way back from the lawn slowly, I guess, in this heat." Alicia was probably right about this, as she was about most things. Bee was a little in awe of Alicia's confidence. She ran some fine and very popular restaurants that showcased local wild foods, things like mesquite bean flour and nopalitos, chopped, pickled, young prickly pear cactus pads. Within 30 seconds of Alicia's statement, Ethan strode in. Shanley's executive director looked energized, and Bee suspected he had some success in convincing Liz about the event center site and was marshaling his energies for the budget discussion. A couple of minutes later, Dr. Ramos walked through the door that opened onto the grounds. He was the 5th board member, a botanist. After Ethan had been hired, he lobbied for some plant expertise on the board and suggested Armando Ramos, one of his jogging friends. Dr. Ramos was wearing a Hawaiian shirt, shorts, and flip-flops. "I'm not even the latest for a change," he noted with that habit he had of twisting his mouth as if to say the joke's on you. Dr. Ramos, she couldn't call him Armando, although she didn't know why. She called the rest of the board members by their first names. Dr. Ramos and Ethan were as much a contrast in formality as Angus and Alicia had been when Bee first came into the room. Buffy Jones, the esteemed donor for the event center, came in next, wearing pretty much what she had on the day before, Bermuda shorts and a polo shirt, lime green this time, and sneakers. Her usually tidy hair was windblown today, and she looked concerned. Bee hoped the concern wasn't about her $1 million donation. Buffy was talking to Myron, who towered over her, even with his stooped posture. He was a bit of an anomaly in this group, clearly not an outdoorsman, which was ironic since he was the son of Alan Shanley, the garden's creator, and a gardener extraordinaire. Myron's pallor was difficult to achieve in Tucson. He wore business clothes similar to Ethan's, but they didn't hang on him as well. Very sorry, Alicia, he said. Buffy and I were just checking out the night blooming Siriuses. She gives them about a week before their one night bloom. He looked around. Mother's not back yet? This was indeed the question. The other 4 board members were ready to start. There was widespread watch checking. Where was Liz? Oh, we certainly can't start without Liz, said Alicia. He wondered if the meeting would actually be easier without her. Okay, so now I won't read the scene where Liz gets hit by the falling eucalyptus branch, but she does. And the thing that is interesting about this is that she was walking in an area where she shouldn't have been walking because it was very windy, and the whole board knew that eucalyptus shear off in the wind. I don't know if you guys know this, but never ever walk in the eucalyptus grove in the wind. You think cottonwood shearing off is bad? Eucalyptus is way worse. Anyway, so she was walking in the eucalyptus grove, but then it turns out, it seems that she was walking towards this bizarre mosaic that somebody had propped up, and it was of her as a young woman. And it looked like her, had a cleft in the chin like hers and blonde hair, but she was young and all this cowboy shirt and hat and a rose pin on her lapel. And she was hit by this eucalyptus branch, and she had to go to the hospital. So this next bit, Bee slid into work a bit late and conducted her usual ritual when she pulled into the parking lot. She took a deep inhale and let her eyes range over the parts of Shanley Gardens that she could see from her car. This daily exercise was an expanded version of what she did at night with her desert painting. Bee didn't allow herself for even a moment to think about what she needed to do at work or whether Jessie was coming down with yet another cold. She took in some of the lovely areas surrounding the former home of one of Tucson's wealthiest families. The adobe house was a modest size compared with the mega mansions of today's wealthy Tucsonans, but the gardens were the attraction. The home beside them echoed the ground beneath them. Bee's eyes focused on the masses of barrel cacti with their golden spines and the tall, shaggy old man cacti with their white beards. She followed the lines of the Dr. Seuss-like tree aloes back towards a native plant garden, which had been such a radical concept when Alan planted it in the 1980s. There wasn't much in bloom there at this ridiculously hot, dry, windy time of year. But there were native saguaros in that garden and beyond. The tall cacti were crowned with rings of succulent fruits. Bee's eyes followed legions of saguaros stretching all the way into Shanley's wild desert area up towards the national park. Miles of desert, miles of saguaros in their oh so human poses, reaching all the way to the foothills of the Rincon Mountains. It was a good thing that she practiced this meditation because when her gaze returned to the parking lot, her calm scurried off. All of the board members' cars were there, except Liz's, of course. She was surely still in the hospital. The row of cars probably meant there was an emergency meeting going on with Ethan. An emergency board meeting with the executive director could not be good. This might be a fine time to take some vacation days. She could take the kids to the beach in San Diego for a quick break. Swimming in chlorinated pools was their salvation in Tucson summers, but the ocean, Ethan might let her go. She could cancel her kids' places and next week's camp, get back part of her deposit. She reached for a hairbrush, tried to make herself look professional enough to talk to her boss or anyone else she ran into. Angus met her at the front door. His eyes were dull and almost as gray as his beard today. He was pale again beneath the tan. It was the same odd color he'd had the day before after he found Liz. Without the humor that usually lit up his face, he looked 60, although Bea knew he was several years younger than that. He came straight to the point. She died. This was the possibility that Bea had been trying to block out of her mind. The cops are on their way. He sagged against the door jamb. I know, I can't believe it either, said Angus. Lord only knows what this means for Shanley Gardens. She caught a glimpse of 2 squad cars pulling up to the building, but she hurried away from them. She wasn't in her office long before her boss came in. As usual, Ethan was perfectly dressed. He wore a freshly pressed white shirt. Well, he wasn't looking for missing shoes in the kitchen cabinet before work. But the day's events were ruffling even Ethan's equable disposition. He ran a hand through his hair and neglected to smooth it back down, so he had a tuft sticking straight up over his right ear. B. Liz died of her head wounds. The police are having a look at the artwork and the eucalyptus tree and that damn fallen branch, and they're probably going to want to talk to all of us. You may need to stick around all day. Thank God it's Monday. He grimaced and went out. Easy for him to say. Shanley Gardens was closed on Mondays and they wouldn't have to deal with the public today, but these kids were used to having a half day on Mondays since she had to work Saturdays. She'd have to let the camp know. She called the camp, nearly finished the July volunteer staffing chart when Angus knocked on the door. 2 knocks, a pause, 2 knocks, their identification code. She put the phone down, as glad she had when she got a look at Angus. He sagged into the chair across from her. Gee, I think they believe I killed her. She could hardly hear him. Oh, come on, Angus. Why would you want to do that? It was an accident. Well, maybe not. I got called in for an interview. They found some saw marks on the limb that fell on her. And B was partially sawed through, if you can believe it. Oh, yeah. And climbing up in that tree would take some physical agility, not what you'd expect of a lot of the people around here, elderly board members and volunteers. Angus sighed, like a tired old man who wouldn't have that kind of agility either. And I was the one who found her. Plus, I didn't like it. I'd already taped off the whole grove with caution tape before they got here, but heck, I was just trying to save somebody else from an accident. That's my job. He'd been saying all this while examining his hands. Then he looked at B. B, you know I thought Liz was a pain in the ass, but you don't kill somebody who's a pain in the ass. Well, of course not. But who on earth would want to do that to her? Well, maybe they'll decide you wanted to. I forgot to mention you're next. They're interviewing in the volunteer room. Okay, so now I'm going to skip ahead and give you a very different taste. We're a ways now through the investigation with Marcia Samuelson, the detective that B knew from the past. And if you read the book, you'll find out why they trust each other so much. There's a backstory. But so Marcia pushed into B's office without knocking. She looked decidedly annoyed. Okay, come talk to me about Datura. Oh, I should give you a little background. Another mosaic was found that had Datura. B followed her without a word. Marcia shut the cop room door with a bang. I think you plant people need to get a life. Roses between the teeth, rose pins, tulip pins, now huge Daturas. What's the deal? I know Datura is poisonous. Everybody around here knows that. We pick up teenagers who experiment with it every year. Usually they come out all right. A couple of times it's been fatal. Not only that, B, a kid just last week lost his vision for 3 days after eating the stuff in a salad. So damn it, B, what's the deal with Datura in this picture? Well, this isn't a high water use plant. Maybe it's not about the fight over getting rid of roses and tulips. That would be good. It'd get Angus off the hook. Marcia just looked at her. So tell me about Datura. Well, obviously, you know, it's a common native plant and it's very toxic. Different plants have different levels of toxicity, so that makes it especially dangerous to experiment with. It's also called devil's trumpet and Jimson weed, which apparently is short for Jamestown weed. The Jamestown settlers got high on it. Also, I guess witches used it and Indian mystics. Great. So what does it have to do with Liz? Maybe somebody thought she was witchy? Somebody is leading us around by the nose, and I do not like it at all. Whoever it is has done an excellent job of keeping their fingerprints off of everything, too. This last thing seems to be made of broken Mexican tiles like the last one. You said that Maria makes things with tiles? Okay, so there's one other staff member you have heard of, Ethan, B, and Angus, and there's a fourth staff member, his name is Javier, and his wife is Maria. You said Maria makes these things with tiles? Yes, but she's in Mexico. We know, we've confirmed it, but we're going to get a warrant to search Javier's house. Oh, no! He's not accused of anything at the moment, but we did find out something interesting when we did some digging about the Shanley property. Did you know that Javier's family owned the original rancho here? They were homesteaders in the mid-19th century. Oh, no, he never mentioned it. Well, you might ask him about it. Like a lot of small farmers, they couldn't make it when the big Anglo land and cattle companies bought up huge tracts of land. They had to sell out, move to town. You mean Alan Shanley bought out Javier's family? No. There was a huge ranch here in between from about 1920 till the place was broken up and sold. Alan bought his 40 acres in the 50s. This parcel was where the big landowners had a dude ranch, bringing in Easterners wanting a comfortable Wild West experience. Well, we should have some signage about this around here. People would be interested in the history. Let's concentrate on the murder. I just wondered if you'd heard anything about this background story. It's something board members might want to cover up. Lots of Mexican ranchers weren't rusted out by simple economics. Violence and trickery were sometimes involved. Looks like you're trying to get me to find more of a motive for Javier to have killed Liz. We're all just gathering information right now, Dee. Thanks for your help with that. I need to get back to the station with this lovely mosaic. Okay, and now a little bit farther along, she's talking to her boss, Ethan. Hey boss, you'll be glad to know the patio home tour is coming together. We now have a waiting list. I wish we could increase the size of the tour, but there are those fire marshal's limits for the luncheon at the end in the boardroom. Yeah, just another one of the limitations we face for raising money around here. That'll change with the event center, he shrugged. This wasn't like Ethan. Hope nothing else horrible's happened, he said. Well, B, at least no one can say I killed Liz to get her bequest for the gardens. Not bad, huh? It's not very polite to complain about a $10,000 bequest. And I'm grateful the funds are to go to garden maintenance, and we all know that's crucial. I guess I'm being such an ingrate because she gave larger gifts to the Arts Council and the church, according to mine. And she endowed the symphony with a couple $1 million. And she left millions to Myron. He said she left in the balance of her estate. I don't know how much that is, but I shouldn't even be thinking about this, much less saying it to you. I guess I thought you thought the gardens meant more to her. But it was Alan's thing, right? She sure got rid of the place fast after he died. Well, yeah. Ethan, do you think, I mean, it's horrible to talk this way, but I know we're all thinking like this. As this does give Myron a motive. I think it's best if you and I don't play amateur detective. Well, he'd shut that window of candor between them. He was back in boss mode. He was probably right, but Marcia had asked her to ferret things out. And Javier seemed to be in trouble, and Marcia hadn't asked her anything about Angus, so that was good, but she figured anything could happen at this point, till they caught the real murder. She took a walk on the grounds to clear her head. The garden's grounds didn't have their usual calming effect. There were maybe 100 people craning their heads at the eucalyptus tree that was cordoned off with a double row of tape inside the single row Angus put around the whole row. He crossed the big lawn, soon to shrink to make way for the event center. There was no denying the cool green grass was a pleasure, a guilty pleasure. Lawns were good in public spaces where people played ball or picnicked on them, but they could easily get by at Shanley with half an acre of grass instead of 3. The roses nearby were looking peaked, and the tulips, of course, had long since bloomed. But the cactus and succulent garden was spectacular as always. This garden, too, was full of people. It seemed that murder might be increasing their admissions take that day. That at least was one positive effect. The spines and dried fruits of the golden barrel cacti shone yellow in the intense sunlight. And among the columnar cacti, it wasn't just the saguaros that were fruiting. The organ pipe's rosy yellow tennis ball sized fruits were splitting open, revealing sweet, red, succulent, seedy insides. Alan had brought these back from Mexico, along with a couple of big fat cardone cacti, in the days when importing plants from Mexico was considerably more laissez-faire. B watched some tourists reading the "Do Not Touch the Plant" sign she'd installed after a child had stroked the white beard of an old man cactus, only to howl in pain at the sharp spines under the beard. Pretty benign plant problem compared to sawed-off eucalyptus branches. Okay, that's probably enough of a taste. I would welcome questions. What? No questions? I bet Tom has one. Oh, Chris has
Well,
one.
I'm curious about your writing process. How long did it take you to write? How did you come up with the idea, or besides what you've already explained? But
You mean, how did I come up with the plot?
well, you explained.
I explained where. The first thing for me was where. And not only where was it going to be in a botanical garden, but I had to like visualize this whole garden in my mind. So I didn't actually start with, I started with where, then I came up with the protagonist who bears certain similarities to me at age 38. And then I had a lot of fun coming up with the board members and the staff. I mean, I love creating characters, and as everybody always says, they kind of take off on their own. And then the plot, I don't know. I don't really know how I came up with the plot. It just kind of came up on its own. I did know who the murderer was, but I didn't know all the details of why until I was going along. And I tried, and the whole thing, I increased it in complexity and added more red herrings and stuff like that the farther I went along.
Have you written before?
I have written, but I've never written a novel. I mean, I've written poetry, and I've written, a couple short stories that have been published. I wrote all the time as an executive director. I wrote annual reports, and I wrote fundraising appeals. I talked in front of people and tried to get them to give me money. But no, I hadn't, and I didn't. I always thought, well, I can't write a novel because it's too hard, it's too long. Actually, poetry comes more naturally to me because I tend to be a person who condenses things, and I had to like pull them out for the novel. And in fact, my editor publisher, it's a little publishing company called Artemisia Publishing in Albuquerque. It's a traditionally published book. And he kept saying, okay, you need to fill this out. Okay, you need more of a transition here, because I do tend to be a condenser. That's my that's kind of my MO. But I'm learning. I'm definitely learning. And I have a second book coming out on January 10th called Bones in the Back 40. And it's it's a sequel to this. And you will be pleased to hear that it takes place in two locations: Shanley Gardens, where the bones are found, and a small town in southwestern New Mexico. And whereas I had fun writing the characters in this book, I had a blast writing the characters in Copperton.
So when's the
Right.
January 10th.
So what was your discipline in writing this?
You mean like what time of the day did I do?
Well, did you have a schedule of writing?
You know,
Pages or?
I haven't done that. What I've done is when I'm serious about it, I look at my calendar and I have certain things that I have to do that are important, like babysitting my granddaughter. And then I put giant X's through where there's big spaces of time, and those giant X's is where I have to sit down and write. I just have to. I tell myself I have to. And, like a lot of people, I think, oh, well, maybe I need to deal with these little things that I can cross off on my list that don't have anything to do with writing. But I tell myself I'm not allowed to do that. That's the only way I can do it. But I don't write like from 8 to 11 in the morning every day or anything like that. I kind of have other things in my life that are important, but I have big enough chunks being retired that if I put X's through it, I can do it.
Do you read mystery?
I do. Yeah, I've always read mysteries for relaxation. I mean, the primary thing I read is probably literary fiction. But if I've read some heavy literary fiction, I go straight to a mystery. And I was saying to Lillian, or to, I guess, yeah, that I read everything by Agatha Christie when I was like 12 to 14. I mean, everything by Agatha Christie. So and my mother was steeped in mysteries. And so, she had like every traditional mystery you can imagine. And, I just pulled them off the shelf. So yeah, I've always read mysteries and I've always read them for relaxation. And this book is a light book, folks. I mean, it's a book to read just to, kick back.
Or besides Agatha Christie, name three mystery writers that you really like.
Oh, I like Louise Penny a lot, as probably everybody does. I've been enjoying reading Michael Oren Duff, who's a local New Mexico writer who writes the pot beef mysteries. And so I've been trying to read environmental mysteries, and there are not very many. And so there's some, not Nevada Bar, but there's, oh God, now I can't remember Scott's last name. Scott, somebody who writes mysteries set in national parks that I have been liking a lot. Sorry, I can't remember his last name. But I just went to the Left Coast Crime conference in Albuquerque. My first time I went, as an author to anything like this, and it was interesting to me that, people write mysteries from every point of view you can imagine. I mean, there's steampunk mysteries. I didn't even know what steampunk was. And there's like mysteries having to do with Regency. It's some regent in the British Crown in some time period. I don't know what, but anyway, they write Regency, and they write, I met a fascinating man who was a cardiologist who had been doing volunteer work in Palestine, and he had been a Zionist Jew, and he wrote mysteries about Palestine and Israel. I mean, people write mysteries about everything. Environmental mysteries, tiny. I felt as an outdoor person and an environmentalist, I was a real outlier. It was interesting in that group. But Chris Neri told me that was a good thing. But I did, I sold this book myself to the publisher, but I did get from bigger presses. I heard, well, this is interesting, but we don't know if we could sell a botanical garden mystery. We don't know if there's a genre of botanical garden mystery. So what do you do about that? I mean, I've written a knitting mystery. There's a lot of knitting. There's a whole lot of cozy mysteries about catering, but I didn't do that. So anyway, yeah, Michael.
So in incorporating humor, did you pitch any humor specifically at botanists?
Did I pitch? No, not botanists per se.
Board members, but not botanists.
Yeah, board members. In fact, I went to Tucson, and my old book group, I didn't live in Tucson for 22 years. Phil and I just bought a house back there. That's my husband, Phil, back there. Recently, a few months ago. And but my old book group that I used to go to 30 years ago is still going, and they read this book. And in the book group were one of my former board presidents, one of my successors as executive director, a former development director who used to work for me, Oh, and somebody who applied for my job when I left and didn't get it.
Oh, no.
So this was like slightly fraught, but it was great. Actually, everybody liked it. But the board member, somebody said to me, "So Marty, was Buffy, you know, the way she said the way she dressed, was she partly modeled on Patsy, who was my former board member?" I said, "No, Patsy didn't come in. This is the truth. Patsy didn't come into this at all. In fact, none of these board members were really exactly more modeled on anybody, but they were put together, pieces of them." And Patsy said, "Marty, I cannot tell you how happy I am to hear that I none of those board members was modeled on me." Yes.
Did you find it difficult to give each of your characters a unique voice to establish their personality through their dialogue?
Well, I don't know. I'll leave it to you to tell me if I did that well or not. I tried.
Did you find it difficult or easy or?
I love dialogue. I love writing dialogue. I think I mean, my two favorite things are writing dialogue and writing natural history descriptions. So it's really fun for me to do. Yeah.
Could you
Tom.
tell us what saguaro fruit actually tastes like?
Oh, it's delicious. People say it tastes like strawberries. Phil, what do you think it tastes like? Yeah, I mean, I don't think prickly pear fruit is very good, but that's because I've been spoiled, because saguaro fruit is sweeter and it just has a,
What does it look like?
oh, it's a spiny little thing like this. If you go to Tucson in June, you'll probably see some on, you know, they are like crowns around the top. And Oregon pipe, as I mentioned, has like absolutely heavenly tasting fruit. I mean, it's as good as any tropical fruit you, and I expect a lot of.
I kind of agree with your editor. You should have told us this.
What's that?
You should have told us what saguaro fruit tastes like after you mentioned it. You know, it's kind of hanging out there.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Yeah.
The cover is lovely, although I haven't seen it up close. Is that a real
No,
photograph or is it?
no, it's a really wonderful artist.
It's lovely.
And yeah, I think he did a fabulous job. He's gonna do the second one too.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a Tucson-based guy, and he had done a lot of botanical art for like Pima County and Desert Survivors Nursery and stuff. So he was, you know, a good, and I said to him, I want something that's botanically accurate. What did I say? Botanically accurate, something else, and with a hint of menace. And he said, "You got me."
It's a menace.
It does.
Ted.
Marty, of the New Mexican mystery writers we have, who are some of your favorites?
Well, one of them is Michael Orendorff. I just read a really fun mystery. I don't know if you guys know about Lindsay Miller wrote a mystery. It's UNM Press, and she was a drama professor, and she's a writer, and her mystery takes place in not even disguised Bear Mountain Guest Lodge. I just finished it. It's a lot of fun, and it's a bunch of female professors who are experts, English professors, who are experts in different writings, like Gertrude Stein and Edith Wharton, and well, Mabel Dodge Lujan. She's not really so much a writer, but anyway, so it's a Chautauqua, and they like put on these characters and their characters are kind of involved in the mystery.
What's the title?
It's called The Unmasking. Yeah. other New Mexico, those are the two New Mexico ones that I would mention. Well, I have a colleague named Vicky Ramaka, who has a novel also published by this press, and that's how I found out about it. And her protagonist is a BLM botanist. And she lives in Aztec, New Mexico. So her mystery takes place in the Four Corners with a botanical, it's called the cactus plot with a botanical edge also.
Well, I think it's really cool that I know an author now.
Oh, well, there's one,
Congratulations.
there's one, there's one. And there may be more than that. Those are just the ones I know that are authors. Yeah. Well, if we're done, I have books to sell and I'd be delighted to do so. And I'll hang around and answer questions if you don't want to.
Will you sign some that we already own?
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.